Tom also asked me to talk a little bit about what I see in the external market, what's happening to the world's economy. And I have a good fortune of every year going over to the World Economic Forum in Davos. And this is 2,500 people who think they're the smartest people in the world, who descend on this little ski village in the Alps and talk to each other for about 4 or 5 days. And you know, he asked me, what are the major areas of concern there? And I you know, it probably gets a lot of press here, but you know, when I was over there, you know, I just wrote it down. It's obviously, you know, much to do about you know, the economic condition of the world. What I took away is, you know, people are expecting that the U.S. economy will still be the linchpin of the world's economy. All right, we may hear a lot about China, we may hear a lot about other segments of the world, other countries, but people are depending on and view the U.S. economy as the prime of the, you know, what primes the pump of the world economy. And they're worried. They're worried that, in fact, we're just kicking the can down the road, all right, and fixing the issues that we have. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We all agree that, in fact, that we're not taking the measures we need to fix our economy. But this was a subject of a lot of debate, a lot of conjecture about would the sequestration happen, and you know, in fact, I think we're hours away from that. A lot of conversation about the European economy. You know, we went through, Europe went through, especially Europe South, some really tough times. Lots of conversation about will Greece have a disorderly exit from the euro? Will Italy make it? You know, all that kind of stuff. A lot of concern that Europe is slipping back into another recession. Double dip, and for in some cases a triple dip into, especially for countries like the UK, which are so important to the world's economy. So, you know, people are not expecting a lot of growth out of Europe. As opposed to a year ago when there were much higher expectations for the world's economy, this year there was, I think, much more pessimism. While I was there, the UK Prime Minister David Cameron came out and said, listen, we in the United Kingdom are going to vote on whether or not we're going to remain as part of the Eurozone. And a lot of people would say, well, you know, that's not like a cafeteria plan. It's not like you could just pick and choose some of the things you like. You're either in or you're out. And he's going to have a referendum as to whether or not you know, the UK stays in the Eurozone. And the overwhelming theory there was the fact that these are way too complicated issues as to what the ramifications of staying in or going out, that have a sort of a national vote, do it on majority. You really need to be sophisticated about the forces at work and to make these kinds of decisions. So that wasn't received very well. So overall, you know, I'll say that, you know, 2012 was a year of two halves. There was a lot more optimism in the first half of last year, and as the world's economy got a little tougher, no doubt that growth slowed down in the second half of 2012, and that's extended into 2013. You know, we see the overall rate of growth of the economy and the overall rate of growth of IT having come down in 2013. And so while we continue to expect to grow at a multiple of the world's IT rate, we expect our overall growth rate will be a bit less than it was last year. So, you know, that's sort of it for my prepared remarks. I love Holy Cross. I love Worcester, produced my wife. I'd be happy to now take your questions and you know, open it up to the field. You know, any Holy Cross student who sits in one of my tables has to ask a question. So, here we go. You know, I'm not smart enough to know whether the stock market's on a bubble or not. There's no beta in the world. There's no return on investment. So people with money on, you know, on the sidelines, I mean, they want to invest in equities because there's, theory, return on investment there. So I think there's a lot of optimism. Things will get better. That's why people are coming back into the market. We see gold is down. But, you know, if I was smart enough to know the answer to your question, I'd be professionally investing, not running around the world for EMC. And just as an aside, I tried to, you know, I thought it'd be interesting to see how many countries that I've been to in the last few years. Because when, in 2006, what happened was I was vice chairman, and Joe Tucci came into my office and said, hey, Bill, the head of sales just quit. I want you to go do it. And I'm like, gee, I'm not a salesman. And I learned two things, one of which was I learned that being head of sales is not about selling. It's about organizing. It's about setting direction. It's about having a strategy. It's about understanding your go-to-market and understanding where the world's going to grow and where your revenues come from. But the world is a complicated place, and you know, if I knew the answer, I'd be doing something else. I have to.
Bill, I want to say congratulations on the Worcester State alum. So
there you go.
Good job. Good job in marrying your wife. I'm the head of a large nonprofit here, and I'm keenly interested. We really focus a lot on education and employment for people. So I'm keenly interested to know how EMC is opening those pipelines for people in jobs and education, and then also in giving back. Since you said you love Worcester, and I'm a head of a nonprofit, I'd like to know how you would really like to give back to Worcester and some of us nonprofits.
Well, Chris Good, who works for us in government affairs and community relations, is somewhere in the room. So I'll defer that. But we do a lot for the communities in which we live and work. You know, we like doing it. And in fact, to be honest, my focus on this has not really been Worcester or Massachusetts. We're less than 50% of our revenues come out from outside the United States. So I've taken a large portion of our community involvement budget and directed it outside the U.S. to some of the fastest growing areas of the world who actually need a lot more than Boston needs or Worcester needs. I mean, you can't believe the incredible poverty in some of these countries that we go to. You can't believe what some of the the EMC people do on their own, whether it's painting schools, whether the trips that they organize to support the communities in which they live and work. It's just it's heart-wrenching, and it's so motivational for me. So we've been trying to focus in the Brazils, the Chinas, the Eastern Europe, the Turkeys, Africa. Africa's a huge opportunity for us, and the standard of living is so low that we'll keep this in mind. But it just gives you a sense of what the opportunity is up there.
Yes, Bill, you mentioned acquisitions as being really critical to the organization over the last few years. I was wondering, how independent do you leave those organizations in sort of growing in their own sort of entrepreneurial spirit, and how important is it, contrary to that, to sort of fold them into EMC and sort of the culture of the larger company?
That's a great question. I spoke last night at Bentley. This is my week for speaking. I spoke last night at Bentley to their M&A course, and I talked exactly about that issue. We've got a great track record in acquiring companies and then bringing them into the fold. And one thing we've learned over the years, if you just stamp out, the minute you buy a company, you stamp out their culture and put in your culture, you're going to lose. Every dollar you pay is for people. The company may have great intellectual property, it may have great patents, it may have great customers, but if you lose their people, you're going to lose their value very, very quickly. So we've learned over the years to try to keep the current management team in place. The people who got you there, we want them to make the company even better. Now, what we've also learned is you can't keep them alone entirely. And so, with the exception of VMware, which we knew day one we had to keep separate, what we do is I use the phrase, we inject some EMC DNA. So we'll take someone from our management team and we'll put them into the new company. And one thing I neglected to say is a lot of these companies that we've acquired, we're acquiring West Coast companies. And usually you've got the West Coast companies acquiring East Coast companies. So we're doing something that goes across the grain, but we've put a lot of people on the West Coast. We put people in Silicon Valley, we put them in Washington. Seattle is a hotbed of technology right now. And by By having a lot of experience, we have a great integration playbook, so we know exactly what to do on which days. But it's all people skills. This is not, it's not a formula. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with their lives, you're dealing with how they want to come to work in the morning, and who they want to work for. And if they don't want to work for EMC, then we've got a big problem. So we've got to make it a really good experience for them to become part of the whole, and recognize what we can bring to the table. We bring a distribution arm second to none in technology. We have the best technology sales force, bar none. We're recognized for it, and we're very proud of it. So we can help accelerate growth. We can help get to places in the world people can't get to because we're typically buying smaller companies. But that's a great question. It's something we spend a lot of time on. Over here.
Just out of curiosity, many of us have heard the terms of gigabyte and megabyte, terabyte. I heard you use a new one tonight I haven't heard of before.
Exabyte.
Yeah. Is that above gigabyte?
Yeah, that's a lot of gigabytes.
So who makes these decisions? And how
So what they name them?
Yeah, who names those things?
Data storage gods.
And how do you get by in the industry so there aren't various terms for terabytes?
Probably IDC comes out with, IDC did the study, they come out with, they probably talk to people, I just go sell them. I don't know where we call them. I just know there's a lot of bytes of data out there that's good for us. What's happened to us though is what happens is, when I started at EMC, we were selling 9 gigabyte drives. We're now selling 4 terabyte drives. We're selling flash storage, so it's not even a spinning disk anymore. You're getting a terabyte of storage. And I'm way too technical even for myself now. But well, we're getting on an integrated circuit. So the industry is fundamentally changing, but it has to, because 10 years ago, did anybody have one of these? Did anybody have an iPad? This machine-generated information. GE's selling jet engines now based on usage. They've got 5,000 or 50,000 sensors in a jet engine, streaming data somewhere, so that they can make sure the engine's good and they can charge their customers. So the amount of data out there is just exploding because the paths to get to it have also increased. So we'll need, I'm sure, after a trillion bytes, we'll need another name soon. Over here.
Well, thanks very much for being here tonight. Very enlightening. Before the election, leading up to the election, we heard a lot about businesses on hold, holding back investment, the uncertainty about taxes, the uncertainty about the political landscape. Could you share your sense as to, at the boardroom level, in the executive suite level, whether there's been any kind of shift since the election, since the tax laws have been stabilized, if you will?
Well, I think it's too soon to tell. I mean, that's 3 months ago, a little more than 3 months ago. Listen, the one thing businesses hate is uncertainty. Tell us the rules and we can operate. This is my whole thing around taxes. I spent a lot of time in taxes in my life. Tell me what the tax rules are and I can live with them no matter what they are. Change them, and it's a monumental thing to change within a company's tax structure. All right? So, companies want stability. They want to know what kind of environment to expect. Just like the investment tax credit, which didn't get passed during the course of the year, got passed after the end of the year. I mean, these are, at one level, this is absurd. We can't create an environment that's more stable, more consistent for businesses to understand where they're going. I would say to you that, it's still early days as to how many of the strategic projects. There's a lot of things that companies do that they have to do. And they invest in IT and whatever because they have to. But there's a lot of strategic projects that they may not do given the uncertainty in today's environment. And they need to see sort of what's going to happen here in the U.S. They need to see, the Eurozone's not going to disintegrate. And they're waiting for some, a little bit firmer ground to move forward.